You know what's kind of crazy though is I did not want to make this video, but I was like, you know what, maybe right now is probably the best time to do it. Like for example, we have the 7th event in the playlist getting nerfed in 1 week, which I did make a video about that yesterday, which is kind of insane. Like imagine guys, one of the events dropping a crazy amount of XP and money gets nerfed in a week, and now we also have the 4th event in the playlist also being pretty similar. Do not worry though, that's also probably going to be nerfed on Wednesday. If it isn't, I would probably be pretty surprised. Like, getting a million XP an hour and $1 million an hour is a bit crazy, and I feel like everybody is going to do it. But you know what's insane about that though is I can't blame people for doing it. The reason for that is this brought me into a pretty interesting question. Is there a grinding problem in Motorfest right now? Which honestly, I would say everybody's going to go, well, yeah, Block, there is definitely an issue with it. And to be honest, I have to agree, it doesn't seem like it's actually correct. The reason why I say that is, for example, guys, there's a lot of events in the game. Like here, we have some events doing around maybe $15,000 to $20,000. We have events doing 30 to 45. Then we have the big one doing around $75,000, or like, with all the part sets, you can probably make around 10 to 15 grand more in some events. Here's the thing about that though, a lot of the events in the game take around 3 to 5 minutes to complete, and you're probably only getting around maybe 20 to 30,000 XP from them. If you want around 50 to 60k, you have to do some of the events that are going to be around 5 to 7 minutes to complete. Like, don't get me wrong here, I do understand the events are probably going to be there. That way you can mix it up and do different styles of races that are a bit longer, giving you more money with like the less of the event, or like, the event being shorter. You obviously get to make more money if you are doing it quicker. The thing about this though is if you are grinding out these races, I do feel like it's taking a bit too long to get items from it. And one of the biggest complaints right now is being able to get like actual max part sets. And a lot of players are probably doing the 7th event before it was patched, or the lovely 4th event right now, which is most likely going to be patched in a few days. And a lot of players are like, wait a minute, we legit have 2 events in the game right now that have probably been some of the craziest grinding events you have ever seen in a racing game. Like, not even kidding. 1 to 2 million XP in an hour is a bit crazy, guys. Don't get me wrong here, but I'm also looking at the bigger picture here. For example, a lot of players are doing these because they do want to go after money and XP, but they also want to go after some of the part sets. Now, a lot of players might be like, well, Blocked, all you have to do is play the game to get the part sets. See, I do understand that, but here's the problem. I did end up going after max part sets on every single class, which I did end up doing pretty early on. And not going to lie here, every single class took me 6 to 8 hours to do them, and also some of them took me 10 to 12 hours to get part sets. Like, I would say everybody is probably not going to have 10 hours to do a part set on a single vehicle. And what's also kind of funny about that though is I wasn't doing like 10-hour sessions to get the part sets. I was actually mixing that around over like 3 to 4 days at a time, even sometimes a week. That way I could actually make content in between that and still go after the part sets. And I have to admit this, guys, going after a full part set, or like, grinding money in XP should not feel like a part-time job in a video game. And what's kind of crazy about this though is when I first started playing Motorfest, I was noticing at first, I was like, you know what, maybe it's not that bad. Like, getting part sets is probably going to be similar to the Crew 2. It probably will take hours, or, getting the right part sets is going to help. Adding like the driver legend points would help. And yes, in some ways it kind of did. In other ways though, I was noticing, guys, 10 hours to get a single part set is legit ridiculous. For example, in the Crew 2, I was noticing in some of the main hypercar events, running a loot digger set in that game, you can also use all of your points, like your icon points. I also have a video going over the legend points in this game, which can be adjusted. In that game, though, you could put like 500 points on Gold Finder, like Goldfinger, and then also like the Lucky perk. And one of the crazy parts about that, though, is I was getting around 10 gold parts from a single event. That was, of course, going to be on like some of the longer hypercar races, but even using a loot digger on some of these street events, you can still see 5+ gold parts on a single drop. Now, don't get me wrong here, I would say on some of the races on Motorfest you can get it, and I do think I also was getting around 4 or 5 gold parts from certain events when doing races, but it's not like you get it every single time you do it, which I do understand to a certain extent, like the RNG thing plays a role. But the other thing I did want to touch on though is we can definitely agree that looking at these events right now with how players are doing them, that there really is going to be like an overall flaw to the entire design of like the events themselves. Like, players shouldn't have to play for 8 to 10 hours for a single part set. Now, don't get me wrong here, I do know RNG plays a role, but like, my goodness, 10 hours? Really? For one part set? I feel like a lot of players are also not going to want to grind 4 hours on end to make some money and go after some of the vehicles. Like, if you did not play the Crew 2 that much and you jump onto Motorfest, you're going to be like, that is a lot of cars I have to buy. probably going to be over 100 million in cars. Maybe I could be wrong, probably less, maybe like 60. Anybody wants to do the math on that? If you don't own any of the cars in the game, it's probably pretty high, I would guess. But that is going to be a lot of grinding to make 60 to 80 million dollars playing the game. Like, don't get me wrong here, I do have a lot of money. I do know a lot of players also do. And on top of that, now a lot of players probably did make a lot from the events. So now they can go buy vehicles and stuff like that, and they probably got part sets. But after these races are nerfed, though, a lot of players are probably going to go, well, why would I jump into other events when I was making over a million XP an hour? I mean, that's honestly pretty hard to touch that. Like, imagine that, guys, $1 million and a million XP an hour constantly. There is pretty much no other reason to do the other events. That's probably why they probably had to nerf it. I do understand where people are coming from, though, because I would say the grinding in this game is a bit of a stretch, and I really do feel like a lot of the events have to be adjusted in some way, whether that's like, more money and XP from the events, upping the legend points, giving us more parts and, better parts having better part sets, like doing the events with a loot digger and also having the legend points maxed out. Give me more gold parts instead of purple or, pink, and then just green and, blue parts is kind of a problem. But overall, though, guys, I would like to know your thoughts on the entire grinding aspect of Motorfest. Do you think, like, the entire thing probably needs a revamp or at least, upgraded things in the events? I would almost say after these two events have come out, it is pretty obvious.